The morning alarm blared through the dormitory, and Cadet Jinho Park jumped out of bed with the same energy he brought to everything. Today marked his third week at the Galactic Defense Force Academy, and he was determined to prove himself. Jinho stood 5 feet 7 inches tall with short black hair and determined eyes. Next to the other alien cadets, he looked small and fragile. But Jinho knew better. Humans might not have the natural armor of the Stonehides or the telepathic powers of the Mentari, but they had something else. Something he hoped to show the rest of the galaxy someday. "Move it, Earthbug!" Sergeant Krell's deep voice thundered down the hallway. "Last one to the training field runs extra laps." Jinho grabbed his uniform and dressed quickly. He had learned that Sergeant Krell meant every threat he made. Sergeant Krell was a Drakian, 7 feet tall with tough leathery skin that shimmered with a blue-green tint under the academy lights. His 4 eyes, 2 large ones for distance and 2 smaller ones for close detail, missed nothing. 3 rows of bony ridges ran from his forehead down his back, marking him as a warrior from a species that had fought across 12 star systems. Jinho raced down the corridor, passing his roommate Taeyang, the only other human at the academy. "He's, in a bad mood today," Taeyang whispered. Jinho nodded and kept moving. They reached the training field just as the time counter hit 0. Sergeant Krell paced in front of the 20 cadets from 15 different planets. His eyes narrowed when they landed on Jinho. "Today we test your survival skills," Krell announced. "This is not a game. In real combat, mistakes mean death." He pointed to a holographic display showing a harsh desert landscape. "You will navigate this terrain with limited supplies. The first team to reach the extraction point passes. The rest fail." Krell began assigning teams. Team 4, Liko, Vex, Taeyang, and... He paused, his upper lip curling in what Jinho had learned was a Drakian smile. "Park." Jinho felt his heart sink. Krell always put him with the strongest cadets and then blamed him when the team struggled. "Worried, Earthbug?" Krell asked, noticing Jinho's expression. "Perhaps your kind should have waited another century before joining the galactic community." Several alien cadets laughed. Jinho kept his face neutral, even as his hands tightened into fists at his sides. "No, Sergeant, I'm ready," he said. "We'll see," Krell replied. The simulation chamber transformed into a vast desert. Hot wind blew sand against Jinho's face. The Academy's technology could create any environment with perfect detail, including the discomfort. Jinho's team gathered around their supply pack. Liko, a tall Centaurian with 4 arms and metallic skin, opened it and counted their supplies. 1 water purifier, 2 emergency rations, a basic medikit, and 1 multi-tool, Liko said. Not much for a 50-mile trek. Vex, an Andorian with natural night vision and skin that changed color with his emotions, turned a worried shade of yellow. "The other team's got more supplies. Sergeant Krell is testing us harder." "He's testing Jinho," Taeyang corrected quietly. "And by extension, all humans." Jinho ignored the comment and studied the map on their tracker. "The shortest path goes through these canyons, but I bet there will be challenges there." "Obviously," Liko said. "We should take the mountain route instead." "That's twice the distance," Jinho pointed out. "But safer," Vex argued. "My people evolved in mountains. I can guide us." Jinho knew that arguing would only waste time. "Your call. Your team leader." Liko nodded. "Mountains it is." As they started walking, Jinho heard Sergeant Krell's voice through their communication devices. "Interesting choice, Cadet Liko. Let's see if your human teammate can keep up with the climb ahead." 6 hours later, Jinho's legs burned as they climbed their 3rd steep ridge. The simulated sun beat down mercilessly. Their water supply was running low, despite careful rationing. "We should have reached the halfway point by now," Vex said, his skin turning an anxious purple. "Something's wrong." Jinho checked the tracker again. "We're still on course, but the terrain is slower going than expected." "Maybe some of us are slowing the team down," Liko said, looking pointedly at Jinho. Jinho bit back a sharp reply. Instead, he pointed to a narrow passage ahead. "That looks like a shortcut through to the next valley." It could be a trap, Taiyang warned. It could be, Jinho agreed. But at our current pace, we'll run out of water before reaching the extraction point. After a brief debate, they decided to take the shortcut. The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. Jinho took the lead, moving carefully over the loose rocks. They had gone about halfway through when Jinho heard a rumbling sound above them. He looked up to see rocks starting to fall. "Rock slide," he shouted. "Run!" The 4 cadets sprinted forward as the simulation created a terrifying cascade of boulders. Jinho pushed Taeyang ahead of him just as a large rock crashed down, cutting off the path behind them. They emerged into a small clearing, breathing hard. Vex's skin had turned bright red with alarm. "Everyone okay?" Jinho asked, checking his teammates. Liko brushed dust from his metallic arms. "Yes, but our supplies are buried under the rock slide." Jinho felt his heart sink. Without water, their chances of completing the mission were slim. "Cadet Park," Sergeant Krell's voice crackled through their devices. "Your suggestion nearly got your team killed. This is why humans are not ready for the dangers of space." Jinho clenched his jaw but said nothing. Arguing with Krell never helped. "What now?" Vex asked, his skin turning a defeated blue. Jinho studied their surroundings. Something about the pattern of the rocks caught his attention. He walked to the cliff face and examined it closely. "There's water here," he said. "What? How do you know?" Liko asked skeptically. Jinho pointed to small green plants growing in the cracks. "These only grow where there's moisture. My grandfather taught me how to find water in dry places back on Earth." Using the multi-tool, Jinho carefully dug into the rock face. After a few minutes, water began to seep out. "It's a natural spring," he explained, setting up their water purifier. "We can refill our canteens." Taiyang grinned. "Nice work, Jinho." Even Liko looked impressed. "That was, observant." "Just luck," came Sergeant Krell's voice. "Let's see if luck gets you to the extraction point." They continued their journey through the night, with Vex guiding them with his superior night vision. By morning, they had covered significant ground. As they crested a final hill, they saw the extraction point, a small shuttle waiting on a flat plain. "We made it," Vex said, his skin turning joyful green. "Not yet," Jinho cautioned. "It looks too easy." As if on cue, 3 combat drones rose from hiding places around the shuttle. Each was armed with stun weapons that would eliminate them from the exercise. "Final test," Sergeant Krell announced. "Reach the shuttle without being neutralized." Liko immediately took charge. "Standard approach formation. Vex and I will draw their fire. Humans, stay behind us." Jinho studied the drone's movement patterns. "Wait, they're scanning on regular intervals. There's a pattern." "We don't have time to analyze," Liko insisted. "We follow protocol." "Protocol will get us stunned," Jinho argued. "These drones have a 3-second blind spot after each scan. If we time our movements..." "Enough." Liko cut him off. "We do this my way." Jinho exchanged looks with Taeyang but fell in line. They advanced in formation with the stronger aliens in front. The drones spotted them immediately. The first stun blast hit Liko squarely in the chest, eliminating him from the exercise. The second caught Vex as he tried to flank. "Stick to the plan," Taeyang shouted, pulling Jinho behind a rock. "The plan failed," Jinho responded. "We need to use the blind spots." After a moment's hesitation, Taeyang nodded. "Lead the way." Jinho watched the scan patterns carefully. "Now!" he shouted, running forward exactly 3 seconds after a scan. They made it to the next cover just before the drones turned back. Using this method, they worked their way closer to the shuttle, moving during the brief windows when the drones couldn't see them. With one final sprint, they reached the shuttle ramp. The simulation dissolved around them, revealing the Academy training room once more. Sergeant Krell stood waiting, his 4 eyes narrowed. "Congratulations," he said, though his tone held no warmth. "You're the first team to complete the exercise." Jinho tried not to show his surprise. "Don't look so pleased, Park," Krell continued. "You disobeyed your team leader's orders. In a real combat situation, that gets people killed. But we succeeded." Jinho pointed out. You got lucky, Krell snapped. Luck runs out, Earthbug. Remember that. As the sergeant walked away, Taeyang patted Jinho's shoulder. He'll never give you credit, but I saw what you did out there. Jinho watched Krell's retreating form. Someday he'll see what humans can really do, he said quietly. I just hope I'm there when it happens. Little did he know how soon that day would come. 3 weeks after the desert training exercise, Jinho and his fellow cadets sat in the academy's tactical classroom. Sergeant Krell paced at the front, describing different combat scenarios. In space battles, you will face enemies with technology beyond what your primitive Earthships can imagine, Krell said, looking directly at Jinho. The void offers no cover, no place to hide. Jinho kept his expression neutral. He had gotten used to Krell's jabs about Earth's relatively new space program. Humans had only joined the Galactic Defense Force 80 years ago, while the Drykians had been members for over 1,000 years. Today's final exam will test your command skills, Krell continued. You will lead simulated space battles against... A loud alarm cut him off. Red lights flashed throughout the room. Emergency alert. All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Krell's 4 eyes widened in surprise. He tapped his wrist communicator. Sergeant Krell reporting, what's happening? A holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed multiple star systems, with red flashing points indicating attack sites. Sergeant, a voice said through the communicator. We are under attack by the Voidborn. They've hit 12 outposts simultaneously, including the monitoring station, near Earth. Jinho felt his heart race. The Voidborn were an aggressive species from the far edge of the galaxy. Until now, they had only attacked isolated outposts, never launching a coordinated assault. Understood, Krell replied. My cadets, and I will report to battle stations. Negative, Sergeant, the voice said. All combat-ready ships have already deployed. We need you for a different mission. Krell frowned. My cadets are not ready for field deployment. This is not a request. Report to Hangar 7 immediately for briefing. The communication ended. Krell turned to the cadets, his leathery face tight, with concern. Gather your field kits and meet me at Hangar 7 in 15 minutes. Move. Jinho joined Taeyang, Liko, and Vex as they rushed to the hangar. None of them spoke. This was not a training exercise. This was real. In the hangar, a small scout ship waited. Commander Zorn, the Academy's director, stood beside it with Sergeant Krell. Cadets, Commander Zorn said, the situation is grave. The Voidborn have launched a surprise attack on multiple fronts. Most of our forces are engaged in defending the core systems. He pointed to a holographic map. The monitoring station near Earth sent a partial distress signal before going silent. We need to know if Earth is under attack. Jinho felt his stomach tighten. His family was on Earth. His parents, his younger sister. Your mission, Zorn continued, is to take this scout ship to the Sol system, assess the situation, and report back. Do not engage the enemy unless absolutely necessary. Sir? Krell protested. These are cadets. They've never faced real combat. I know, Sergeant, Zorn replied grimly. But every combat-ready team is already deployed. You're all we have. Krell's mouth tightened, but he nodded. Understood, sir. Sergeant Krell will command the mission, Zorn told the cadets. Follow his orders without question. Your lives depend on it. The commander's words hung in the air as they boarded the scout ship. Jinho took one last look at the academy before the doors closed behind him. The scout ship called the Whisper was small but fast. It had basic weapons and strong shields, but it was designed for reconnaissance, not combat. In the cockpit, Sergeant Krell assigned positions. Liko, you're on navigation. Vex, communications. Taeyang, weapons systems. Park. He paused, clearly unhappy. Monitor the sensor readings. Jinho took his seat at the sensor console. It was the simplest job, but he was determined to do it. Well, as the ship left the Academy's docking bay, tension filled the small cockpit. No one spoke as they prepared for the jump to hyperspace. Course laid in for the Sol system, Liko reported. Engaging hyperspace drive in 3, 2, 1, Krell said. pushing the controls forward. The stars stretched into lines as the ship accelerated. Jin-Ho felt the familiar pull of hyperspace travel, but this time it was different. This wasn't a training run. They were heading toward real danger. Once they were in hyperspace, Krell turned to face the cadets. Listen carefully. This mission is simple. We observe, we report, we return. We do not engage the enemy unless there is no other choice. His eyes lingered on Jin-Ho. Some of you may feel personal connections to this mission. Earth is your home. But remember your training. Emotions lead to mistakes, and mistakes get people killed. Jin-Ho nodded, knowing Krell was talking directly to him. Understood, Sergeant. Good, Krell said. Now get some rest. We'll reach the Sol system in 8 hours. Jin-Ho tried to sleep, but his mind kept racing with worry. What if Earth was already under attack? What if his family was in danger? After tossing and turning for hours, he gave up and returned to the cockpit. To his surprise, he found Taeyang already there, staring out at the streaming lights of hyperspace. Couldn't sleep either? Taeyang asked. Jin-Ho shook his head. I keep thinking about home. Me too, Taeyang said quietly. My parents live near Sol. If the Voidborn have reached Earth. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jin-Ho checked the ship's controls. 5 more hours until we drop out of hyperspace. Do you think we're ready for this? Taeyang asked. For real combat? Before Jin-Ho could answer, Sergeant Krell's voice came from behind them. No, you're not ready. They turned to see the sergeant entering the cockpit. Combat is not like training, Krell said, taking the pilot's seat. In combat, everything happens faster, louder, more chaotically than you can imagine. Something in his voice made Jin-Ho look closer. For the first time, he saw Krell not as the harsh instructor who seemed to hate humans, but as a soldier who had seen real war. How many combat missions have you been on, Sergeant? Jin-Ho asked. Krell's lower eyes narrowed. 23 major engagements, 6 ground assaults. And did you ever feel ready? Jin-Ho pressed. Krell was silent for a moment. No, he finally admitted. No soldier ever feels truly ready. The sergeant studied the controls, then sighed. The Voidborn are dangerous, more dangerous than you can understand. They don't capture prisoners, they don't accept surrender, they destroy everything in their path. Why do they attack? Taeyang asked. Resources, Krell replied. Living space, or maybe they just enjoy destruction. We've never managed to communicate with them. Jin-Ho thought about this. What makes them target specific planets? They prefer worlds with abundant water and moderate temperatures, Krell explained. Worlds like Earth, Jin-Ho finished. The realization hung heavily in the air. 4 hours later, the entire crew was back in the cockpit as they prepared to exit hyperspace. Jin-Ho monitored the sensor readings carefully, dropping out of hyperspace in 3, 2, 1, Krell announced. The streaking stars returned to normal as the ship decelerated. The familiar blue and green sphere of Earth appeared on their view screen. Initial scan shows no Voidborn ships in the immediate vicinity, Jin-Ho reported, studying his console. Something's not right, Krell said. The monitoring station should be responding to our hails. Vex worked at the communications panel. No response from the station. All GDF channels are silent. Could they have been destroyed? Liko asked. Maybe, Krell replied. Park, do a more detailed scan of the system. Jin-Ho adjusted the sensors to sweep the entire solar system. After a moment, his console beeped with a warning. Multiple objects detected near Mars, he reported. They're small, possibly debris. Or mines, Krell muttered. Typical Voidborn tactic. Scatter mines, then hide and wait. He took the ship closer to Earth, moving cautiously. Any sign of GDF vessels? Jin-Ho checked again. None, Sergeant. Suddenly, the ship's alarm blared. Jin-Ho's console lit up with warnings. Energy signature detected, he shouted. Coming from behind the moon. Before Krell could react, a massive ship appeared, moving fast toward their position. Voidborn destroyer, Krell yelled. Evasive maneuvers. The scout ship lurched as Krell spun it away from the approaching threat. But the Voidborn vessel was faster, launching a volley of energy blasts that rocked their small craft. "Shields at 60%, Taeyang reported. "Return fire," Krell ordered. Taeyang fired their weapons, but the shots barely scratched the destroyers. Thick hull. Another blast hit them, sending sparks flying from the control panels. "Shields at 30%, Taeyang shouted. "We can't take another hit like that." "Set course for Earth atmosphere," Krell ordered. "We can lose them in the cloud cover." Jinho looked at him in shock. "But the planet's defenses might fire on us too. Better to take that chance than face the Voidborn," Krell replied grimly. "Hold on tight." The scout ship plunged toward Earth, with the Voidborn destroyer in hot pursuit. As they entered the atmosphere, the ship shuddered violently. "We're coming in too fast," Liko warned. Jinho watched as the continents of Earth grew larger on the viewscreen. He could make out the shapes of Asia and the Korean peninsula. "Brace for impact," Krell shouted as another blast from the destroyer hit them. The control systems failed. The ship spun wildly as it hurtled toward the ground. Jinho's last thought before the crash was of home, so close, yet still out of reach. Jinho woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of sparking wires. His head throbbed as he pushed himself up from the floor of the scout ship. Around him, emergency lights blinked red in the darkness. "Everyone alive?" He called out, his voice rough. Taeyang groaned from nearby. "I'm okay, just bruised." "Functional," came Vex's voice, his skin glowing a dim blue in the darkness. Liko appeared from the back of the ship. "The engine room is destroyed. We won't fly again without major repairs." Jinho looked toward the pilot's seat where Sergeant Krell lay slumped over the controls. Blood, dark purple instead of red, ran down the side of his face. "Sergeant?" Jinho moved to Krell's side, checking for a pulse in the way he'd been taught for Drakian physiology. It was there, but weak. Krell's eyes, two of them at least, fluttered, open. "Status report," he mumbled. "We crashed in what looks like a mountain range," Jinho said, looking out the cracked view screen. "The ship is damaged beyond repair. You're injured." Krell tried to move and let out a pained growl. "My leg is broken." Jinho carefully examined the sergeant's leg. The bone had snapped clean through, the blue-green skin already swelling around the break. "Liko, get the med kit," Jinho ordered. Then, realizing he had just given an order to a senior cadet, he added, "Please." Liko didn't complain. The chain of command seemed less important now that they were stranded on Earth with the Voidborn somewhere above them, while Liko retrieved the medkit. Jinho checked the ship's systems. Most were offline, but the emergency beacon was functional. "Should we activate the beacon?" Taeyang asked. "No," Krell said through gritted teeth. "The Voidborn will detect it before our forces do." Jinho helped Liko set Krell's broken leg, using the ship's medical supplies to create a splint. The sergeant remained stoic, but Jinho could tell he was in great pain. "We need to assess our situation," Krell said once his leg was stabilized. "Park, Taeyang, you're on Earth. Where are we?" Jinho moved to the navigation system, which still displayed their crash coordinates. He studied them for a moment. "We're in the Taebaek Mountains," he said. "Eastern Korea, about 200 kilometers from Seoul." "Any human settlements nearby?" Krell asked. Jinho checked the map. "There's a small town about 15 kilometers west, but getting there means crossing rough mountain terrain." "What about the Voidborn?" Vex asked, his skin shifting to a worried purple. "Do you think they saw where we crashed?" "They know we're on this continent," Krell said, "but these mountains will hide our exact location, for now." Jinho gathered what supplies he could find. Emergency rations, water purifiers, medical supplies, and 4 standard-issue GDF blasters. Not much for a group of cadets stranded on a potentially hostile planet. "We need to contact GDF Command," Krell said. "Warn them about the Voidborn presence." "All long-range communications are down," Liko reported, "and our personal communicators won't reach orbit." "Then we need to find a human communications facility," Krell decided. "Park, Taeyang, this is your world. You lead." Jinho blinked in. "Surprise." Krell had never put humans in charge of anything before. "Yes, Sergeant," he said, trying to hide his shock. "We should leave soon. The sun will set in a few hours, and these mountains get very cold at night." They set out from the crash site with Jinho in the lead. Taeyang helped support Sergeant Krell, who could barely walk even with the splint. Liko and Vex carried their supplies and guarded the rear. The mountain path was steep and rocky. Jinho picked the easiest route he could find, but progress was slow with Krell's injury. "I'm slowing you down," Krell growled after they had traveled for an hour. "We're not leaving you behind, Sergeant," Jinho said firmly. "That's not what I meant, Earthbug," Krell snapped, using his old insult. But somehow it sounded less harsh now. "I meant we need to find shelter before dark." Jinho looked at the sky. The sun was getting low, casting long shadows across the mountains. "There should be hiking shelters in these mountains. My father and I used to trek here when I was younger." "You know this area?" Taeyang asked. Jinho nodded. "Not perfectly, but better than a map. There's a shelter about 2 kilometers ahead, if I remember correctly." They continued more carefully now, with Jinho scanning the landscape for landmarks. He recognized. The distant sound of an aircraft made them all freeze. "Down," Krell ordered, pulling them behind a large rock. A sleek black ship passed overhead, its design unlike anything in the GDF fleet. The Voidborn were searching for them. "They're hunting us," Vex whispered, his skin turning a fearful yellow. "They want to make sure there are no survivors to report back," Krell said grimly. "We need to stay hidden." They waited until the ship disappeared over the next ridge before continuing, now moving from cover to cover. Jinho led them through a dense section of forest, using the trees to hide their movement. As the sun began to set, Jinho spotted the shelter, a small wooden structure built for hikers caught in bad weather. "There," he pointed. "We can rest there for the night." The shelter was basic but solid, with a small fireplace and wooden benches that could serve as beds. Jinho helped settle Krell inside while the others secured the perimeter. "No fire," Krell warned. "The smoke would give away our position." They ate cold rations in the growing darkness. Without a fire, the mountain air quickly grew chilly. The alien cadets, used to the controlled temperature of the academy, shivered in the cold. "How far to the town?" Krell asked, his voice tight with pain. "About 12 kilometers, Jinho replied. "But the terrain gets easier from here." "What's our plan when we reach the town?" Liko asked. Krell tried to shift into a more comfortable position, wincing as he moved his broken leg. "We need to contact GDF Command and warn them about the Voidborn presence. Then we need to assess the situation, find out if this is an isolated attack or part of a larger invasion." "And if it's a larger invasion?" Taeyang asked quietly. "Then Earth is in serious danger," Krell replied. "The Voidborn don't come for peace talks. They come to take planets." A heavy silence fell over the group. Jinho looked out the small window at the darkening sky, wondering if his family was safe. "We should rest in shifts," Krell finally said. 2 awake, 3 asleep. "Park, you take first watch with me. The others get some sleep." As Liko, Vex, and Taeyang settled down to rest, Jinho sat near the door with his blaster ready. Krell watched him with an unreadable expression. "You seem different here," Krell said after a long silence. "Sir?" Jinho asked, surprised by the comment. "At the academy, you were—" Krell paused, searching for the right word. "Hesitant. Here, you move with confidence." Jinho considered this. "This is my home. I know this place. Knowledge of terrain is a valuable military asset," Krell said. It wasn't quite praise, but it was the closest thing to it that Jinho had ever heard from the sergeant. They sat in silence for a while longer. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the trees. "Why did you join the GDF, Park?" Krell asked. Suddenly Jinho was surprised by the personal question. "To protect Earth, to make a difference." "Many say that," Krell replied. "Few mean it." "I mean it," Jinho said firmly. "Earth is new to the galactic community. We need to prove ourselves." "Prove yourselves," Krell repeated. "Is that why you never complained about my methods?" Jin-ho chose his words carefully. I knew the other. Cadets watched how I responded. If I showed weakness, it would reflect on all humans. Krell made a sound that might have been a laugh. Smarter than I gave you credit for. Before Jin-ho could respond, a distant explosion lit up the night sky. They both moved to the window. That came from the direction of the town, Jin-ho said, his heart sinking. The Voidborn aren't just searching, Krell said grimly. They're attacking. Jin-ho's hand tightened on his blaster. We need to move now. In the dark? Krell asked. That's risky. Staying here is riskier, Jin-ho replied. If they're attacking towns, they'll search the mountains next. We need to warn people. Krell studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Wake the others quietly. As Jin-ho moved to rouse his fellow cadets, he realized that something had changed. For the first time, Sergeant Krell had listened to his assessment and agreed with it. They gathered their supplies quickly and slipped out into the night. The distant glow of fires guided them toward the town, and toward whatever dangers awaited them there. The small town of Jangsan was in chaos when Jin-ho and his team reached its outskirts. Several buildings were on fire, casting an orange glow over the streets. People ran in all directions, carrying whatever they could save from their homes. Stay hidden, Jin-ho whispered, guiding the group behind an abandoned truck. We don't know where the Voidborn are. From their hiding spot, they watched as 3 Voidborn soldiers moved methodically down the main street. They were tall, almost 2 meters, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each carried a weapon that pulsed with eerie blue energy. What are they doing? Taeyang whispered. Scanning for technology, Krell replied quietly. The Voidborn strip planets of advanced tech before settling. Jin-ho noticed that the Voidborn were avoiding the burning buildings. They don't like fire, he observed. Krell nodded. Their skin is sensitive to extreme heat. It's one of their few known weaknesses. We need to find communications equipment, Liko reminded them. Any ideas? Jin-ho pointed to a building at the end of the street. That's the town's emergency center. They should have radio equipment we can use to contact military bases. Too exposed, Krell said, wincing as he shifted. His injured leg. We'd be spotted immediately. Jin-ho studied the town layout. There's another way. Behind the buildings, there's probably an alley system. We can use that to get closer. And then? Vex asked, his skin turning a worried shade of purple. Then, we create a distraction, Jin-ho said, his mind working quickly. Draw the Voidborn away from the emergency center. Krell gave him a long look. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing, Jin-ho countered. If the Voidborn have landed here, they've probably landed in other places too. We need to warn GDF Command. After a moment, Krell nodded. What's your plan, Cadet? Jin-ho felt strange being asked for a plan by the sergeant who had always dismissed his ideas. Taeyang and I know this world best. We'll create the distraction. Liko, you and Vex get Sergeant Krell to the emergency center and send the message. Split up? Liko asked, looking concerned. Is that wise? No, Jin-ho admitted. But it gives us the best chance of success. Krell studied Jin-ho's face. The cadet is right. We divide to multiply our chances. He turned to Liko and Vex. You two are with me. Follow Park's directions to the emergency center. Jin-ho quickly drew a rough map in the dirt, showing them the back route to the building. Once inside, look for radio equipment. Military frequency is standard GDF emergency band. And what will your distraction be? Krell asked. Jin-ho pointed to several fuel tanks behind a nearby garage. Those should make enough noise to draw attention. Krell's eyes widened slightly. That's not a distraction. That's an explosion. We'll be careful, Jin-ho promised. The sergeant hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his commander's badge. Take this. It contains my access codes. When you contact GDF Command, they'll need verification. Jin-ho accepted the badge, surprised by Krell's trust. Yes, sir. Don't die, Earthbug, Krell said, but the old insult now sounded almost like a nickname. The two groups separated, moving quietly through the shadows of the burning town. Jin-Ho and Taeyang made their way toward the fuel tanks, keeping low and using the chaos to mask their movements. "This isn't what I expected when I joined the academy," Taeyang whispered as they crouched behind a parked vehicle. "Fighting on Earth?" Jin-Ho asked. "No. Making decisions that could actually matter." Jin-Ho understood. At the academy, failure meant bad grades or extra laps. Here, failure could mean Earth falling to the Voidborn. They reached the fuel tanks and set up their blasters to overheat and explode when triggered remotely. "This should give us about 2 minutes after activation," Jin-Ho explained. "Enough time to get clear and for the others to reach the emergency center. And enough time for every Voidborn in town to come running," Taeyang added nervously. Jin-Ho looked toward the emergency center, where he could just make out Liko helping Krell toward the back entrance with Vex guarding their rear. "Give them 1 more minute," Jin-Ho said, checking his watch. Suddenly, a Voidborn patrol rounded the corner, almost walking directly into them. The alien soldiers raised their weapons. "Now!" Jin-Ho shouted, triggering the overload on their blasters. He and Taeyang sprinted away as the Voidborn opened fire, blue energy blasts hitting the ground around them. 60 seconds later, the fuel tanks erupted in a massive explosion that shook the ground beneath their feet. The Voidborn soldiers turned toward the explosion, momentarily forgetting about the 2 cadets. Jin-Ho and Taeyang used the opportunity to slip away into the maze of small streets. "Think it worked?" Taeyang asked as they took cover in an abandoned shop. "We'll find out soon," Jin-Ho replied, trying to catch his breath. "Let's circle back toward the emergency center and meet the others." On the other side of town, Krell felt the explosion rumble through the ground. The distraction had worked. Voidborn patrols were running toward the blast site, leaving the path to the emergency center clear. "The humans are resourceful," Liko admitted as he helped Krell through the back door of the building. "Perhaps," Krell grunted, the pain in his leg growing worse. "If they survive." Inside, the emergency center was deserted, equipment left running. As the staff had evacuated, Vex found the radio system and began working to establish a connection. "Can you reach GDF command?" Krell asked, lowering himself into a chair. Vex adjusted the frequencies. "There's interference. The Voidborn must be jamming communications." "Try the military bands," Krell ordered. "Use my access codes." As Vex worked, Liko kept watch at the windows. "More Voidborn approaching," he warned. "At least 6 of them." Krell checked his blaster's charge. "How much longer, Vex?" "Almost there," the Andorian replied, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. "I think I found a frequency they're not jamming." A burst of static came from the radio, followed by a voice. "Identify yourself. This is Korean Defense Force." "This is Sergeant Krell, Galactic Defense Force ID 87392, Krell said quickly. "We have a Voidborn invasion force in your sector. Repeat, Voidborn invasion." "Message received," the voice replied. "We have reports of similar landings across the region. Hold position for extraction." "Negative," Krell said. "We need immediate evacuation. We have critical information about the Voidborn fleet position." Before the voice could reply, the radio went dead. "They found our frequency," Vex said, his skin turning pale. "Communications are jammed." Liko moved away from the window. "Voidborn approaching the building. We're trapped." Krell tried to stand but fell back into the chair, his broken leg unable to support his weight. "We need to hold this position until Jin-Ho and Taeyang return, or until the Korean military arrives," Liko added. "If they arrive," Krell said grimly. He checked his blaster again. "Set up defensive positions. We don't leave without the others." Jin-Ho and Taeyang made their way back toward the emergency center, avoiding Voidborn patrols that were now swarming the town. As they approached, they saw the building surrounded by enemy soldiers. "They found them," Taeyang whispered. "What now?" Jin-Ho studied the situation. With Krell injured and the building surrounded, a direct rescue seemed impossible. They needed another plan. His eyes fell on a nearby power station. "I have an idea," he said, "but it's risky. Riskier than being stranded on a planet under alien invasion?" Taeyang asked with a weak smile. Jinho pointed to the power station. If we overload the town's power grid, we could create a blackout. The Voidborn don't see well in total darkness, but we can use our night training. Taeyang nodded slowly. Sergeant Krell always made us train in the dark. Exactly, Jinho said. He was preparing us without us realizing it. They moved carefully toward the power station, staying in the shadows. Jinho thought about all the times Krell had pushed them beyond what they thought they could endure. The night drills, the sensory deprivation exercises, the impossible scenarios. Now, those harsh lessons might save their lives. Sergeant Krell might have been tough on us, Jinho said quietly, but he was making us ready for this moment. As they reached the power station, Jinho realized something important. Humans weren't weaker than other species. They were different. And those differences, their adaptability, their creativity, their determination, might be exactly what they needed to survive. Jinho and Taeyang worked quickly at the power station controls. Years of watching his father fix electrical systems gave Jinho enough knowledge to understand the basic layout. These switches control power distribution, he explained to Taeyang. If we overload all sectors at once, the safety systems will trigger a complete shutdown. How long will the blackout last? Taeyang asked, keeping watch for Voidborn patrols. Maybe 10 minutes before emergency systems activate, Jinho said. It should be enough time. A noise from outside made them freeze. Through the dirty window, they saw 2 Voidborn soldiers approaching the power station. They're coming, Taeyang whispered. We need more time. Jinho looked around desperately and spotted a maintenance tunnel. This way, he said, pulling Taeyang toward it. We can finish the job from inside the power grid. They slipped into the narrow tunnel just as the Voidborn entered the building. The tunnel led them deeper into the power station, where large transformers hummed with electricity. Perfect, Jinho said, examining the main control panel. From here we can trigger an overload without being detected. He worked quickly, redirecting power flow to create a surge that would overwhelm the system. Sparks began to fly from the nearby equipment. How long? Taeyang asked nervously. 30 seconds, Jinho replied. When the lights go out, we head straight for the emergency center. They counted down silently. Suddenly, a tremendous surge of electricity shot through the system. The transformers groaned, then went silent. All across town, lights flickered and died. Total darkness fell. Now, Jinho whispered. Stay close. They moved through the blackness with confidence, their eyes adjusting much faster than the Voidborns would. Jinho heard confused shouts as the alien invaders lost their vision in the unexpected darkness. Outside, the town had transformed. Without electrical lights, only the fires provided illumination. Jinho and Taeyang used the shadows to their advantage, moving swiftly toward the emergency center. When they reached the building, they found the Voidborn guards disoriented, their movements slow and uncertain in the darkness. Jinho signaled to Taeyang, and they slipped past the confused aliens to the back entrance. Inside, they found Krell, Liko, and Vex huddled in the main room, weapons ready. Park, is that you? Krell called out quietly. Yes, Sergeant, Jinho replied. We need to move now while the power is out. The Voidborn have the building surrounded, Liko pointed out. Not anymore, Jinho said. They can't see in the dark. They've scattered trying to find the source of the blackout. Krell nodded, impressed. Good thinking, Cadet. We need to get to higher ground, Jinho continued. A place where we can see the bigger picture and maybe contact help again. I can barely walk, Krell reminded him. I'll slow you down. Then we'll carry you, Jinho said firmly. No one gets left behind. That's what you taught us. A look of surprise crossed Krell's face. Then he nodded. Lead the way, Cadet. With Liko and Taeyang supporting Krell between them, they left the emergency center. Vex and Jinho took point, guiding the group through the darkened streets. They had gone about 2 blocks when the first emergency lights began to activate around town. Their window of darkness was closing. There, Jinho pointed to a hill overlooking the town. The old watchtower. We can see everything from there. The climb was difficult with Krell's injury, but they made steady progress. When they finally reached the top, they had a clear view of the surrounding area, and what they saw was alarming. In the distance, multiple void-born ships were landing in a large field. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of soldiers were emerging. "This is worse than we thought," Krell said grimly. "They're establishing a foothold." Jinho studied the void-born movements. "They're setting up in a standard military formation, just like the ones we studied at the academy. Standard formations don't work well on Earth," Taeyang noted. "The terrain is too varied." Jinho nodded. "Exactly. They're fighting by their rulebook, not adapting to our world." Krell looked at Jinho with new understanding. "What are you suggesting, Cadet?" "The Korean military will respond soon," Jinho said. "But they don't know what they're facing. We do. We need to give them an edge." He pointed to the Voidborn's largest ship. "That's their command vessel. If we can disrupt their communications, their standard formations will fall apart." "And how do we do that?" Liko asked skeptically. "We're 5 cadets against an invasion force." Jinho smiled. "We don't fight them directly. We use what we know about them." He turned to Krell. "Sergeant, you said the Voidborn are sensitive to heat, right?" Krell nodded. "Extreme heat disrupts their sensory systems, and they rely heavily on centralized command," Jinho continued. "Without direct orders, individual soldiers get confused." He pointed to a nearby water tower. "If we can create a steam explosion near their command ship, we could temporarily blind their sensors and disrupt communications." "That's..." Krell started, then paused. "Actually not a terrible plan." "High praise," Taeyang said with a small smile. Jinho laid out his strategy. Liko and Vex would create a distraction on the east side of the field. Meanwhile, Jinho and Taeyang would approach the water tower and rig it to rupture, creating a massive steam cloud over the command ship. "And me?" Krell asked. "You'll coordinate from here," Jinho said. "With your tactical experience, you can guide us through our comm units." Krell studied Jinho's face. "You've come a long way from the cadet I first met, Park." "I had a good teacher," Jinho replied, "even if he was hard on me." For the first time, Krell smiled. "Perhaps especially because I was hard on you." The plan went into action as night fully fell. Jinho and Taeyang approached the water tower cautiously, while Liko and Vex moved to their position on the eastern edge of the field. "Voidborn patrol approaching your position." Krell's voice came through their comm units. "Hold until they pass." Jinho and Taeyang pressed themselves against the base of the water tower as 2 Voidborn soldiers walked by, their gray skin almost glowing in the moonlight. "Clear," Krell said after they passed. "Proceed with the next phase." Jinho climbed the water tower's maintenance ladder, carrying the equipment they'd salvaged from the emergency center. At the top, he attached a small explosive device to the tank's release valve. "Device planted," he reported. "Detonation in 3 minutes." "Copy that," Krell replied. "Liko, Vex, begin distraction now." On the eastern side of the field, flashes of light appeared as Liko and Vex fired their blasters into the air, drawing Voidborn attention away from the water tower. Jinho and Taeyang retreated to a safe distance as the timer counted down. Wadi ducks, the explosive detonated. It shattered the release valve, sending a massive plume of hot water vapor into the air directly over the Voidborn command ship. The effect was immediate. The steam cloud enveloped the ship, and the Voidborn soldiers began moving erratically, their sensors disrupted by the sudden heat and moisture. "It's working," Taeyang exclaimed. Jinho watched as confusion spread through the Voidborn ranks. Without clear commands, the alien soldiers broke formation, some retreating, others firing wildly. Then, from the south, came the sound of aircraft engines. Korean military helicopters appeared, followed by fighter jets. They had detected the Voidborn presence and were responding. "The distraction worked," Krell said through the comm. "The human military has arrived and the Voidborn are in disarray." Jinho and Taeyang raced back to the watchtower, narrowly avoiding Voidborn patrols along the way. When they arrived, they found Krell watching the battle with satisfaction. "You're Plan worked, Cadet, he said as Jin-Ho approached. Unorthodox, but effective. Human tactics, Jin-Ho replied. We adapt. As they watched, the Korean forces engaged the disorganized Voidborn. Without their usual coordination, the aliens were outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. We should signal the military, Liko suggested. Let them know we're here. Jin-Ho nodded and set up a signal flare. Within minutes, a helicopter approached their position and landed nearby. Korean soldiers helped them aboard, their eyes widening at the sight of the alien cadets. Jin-Ho explained the situation quickly, and they were airlifted to a military base outside Seoul. 3 days later, Jin-Ho stood beside Sergeant Krell's hospital bed. The Drakian's leg was healing well under Earth doctor's care, with guidance from GDF medical protocols. The reports say the Voidborn are retreating across all fronts, Jin-Ho told him. Your information about their fleet positions helped turn the tide. Krell nodded. And your understanding of Earth terrain and human tactics proved decisive. A Korean general entered the room, followed by a GDF commander who had arrived with reinforcements. They both looked serious. Sergeant Krell, the GDF commander said, we've reviewed your report. The cadets under your command performed admirably in an impossible situation. They did, Krell agreed. He looked at Jin-Ho. Especially Cadet Park. His knowledge of Earth and innovative thinking saved the mission. Jin-Ho stared at Krell in surprise. He had never expected such praise. The GDF Academy training program clearly has gaps, Krell continued. We focus too much on standard procedures and not enough on adaptive thinking. Cadet Park has demonstrated that humans bring valuable perspectives to the Galactic Defense Force. The GDF commander nodded. We agree. That's why we're recommending changes to the Academy curriculum, to incorporate more Earth-based tactics and problem-solving approaches. Jin-Ho could hardly believe, whoa,